Great.
Hello, Principal Matters listeners. I'm so excited. We have a big name for you here today. I'm excited. Hi, Richard.
Hey, wait, I thought you were the big name. I'm happy to
No,
be here.
no, I am not the big name. You, my friend, are the big name. Let me tell our listeners who you are. Okay, Richard Culatta. Am I saying that correctly?
Yep.
Okay, Richard Culatta is the CEO of ISTE and ASCD, and Richard is focused on creating the next generation of innovative learning leaders. Richard had served as the Chief Innovation Officer of the state of Rhode Island and was appointed by President Barack Obama to lead the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Educational Technology. His book, which we are going to talk about today, titled Digital for Good, Raising Kids to Thrive in an Online World, published by Harvard Business Publishing, aims to help create conditions for healthy tech use at home and school. I know a big passion project for you, right, Richard? That tech home school connection.
It is, my heart is in that work, that's for sure.
Yep. And you have a big job. I mean, you're on Capitol Hill, you're on the West Coast, you're on the East Coast, you're international, a lot of things going on in your world professionally.
It's a bit, look, it is a busy time in the education world. I think all of us, not just me, I think you're feeling this and others, like it's sort of like whack-a-mole these days, right?
Right.
With all the things going on. So we all have to stay really on our A game at the moment, that's for sure.
Absolutely. It is whack-a-mole. Maybe we could title this podcast the Whack-a-Mole
It's a great
edition.
title.
So, Richard, there's a lot of reasons I wanted you to be on the podcast today, not least the recent collaboration with ISTE and ASCD with Meta, which is giving school administrators an avenue to manage Instagram accounts that disrupt their schools. We're going to talk more about that in a bit. But first, I want to talk about ISTE and ASCD and our listeners. Full disclosure, I am biased. I'm not. I love ISTE and ASCD. So full disclaimer, I've been involved with the ASCD for many years, been an author of books, articles, and blog posts for about 10 years. But for our listeners, I want you to know this man knows education, educational leadership inside and out. So, Richard, tell us what were some of the biggest challenges in bringing these two very established, well-respected organizations, ASCD and ISTE, together, and how was that navigated?
Huh. It's a great question. There's a lot of challenges. I'm going to sort of lump them into two buckets. One is probably the least interesting for your listeners, but it's worth mentioning, which is just the logistics of bringing two organizations together, right? That's hard work, and it's interesting because merging there isn't a whole lot out there on guidance for how to merge nonprofit organizations. Everybody wants to help consult and give advice on how to merge for-profit organizations. In the nonprofit world, we don't do it very often. And I actually think it's a problem. I think the industry would be much better served if a number of nonprofits could merge more easily. If that was more of the culture, right? I think a lot of times nonprofits aren't as effective as they could be if they merged with each other. So I'll just put that out there. So a lot of logistics that we had to learn. But the other part is just the idea of really combining cultures. And the organizations have different cultures, both really good and both really unique. And for those that aren't familiar with the organization, so ASCD is really the lead organization for curriculum leaders, right? And then on the ISTE side, again, for those that aren't familiar, it's really sort of the tech and innovation leaders on the about learning, right? We really are. These are people still in classrooms in schools, but focused on tech and innovation around learning. Those have been very different communities forever. And as we came out of COVID in particular and looked at the future of learning, we just thought, this isn't serving anybody well, right? It's not serving teachers well, it's not serving students well to have the people who are really focused on leading curriculum and instruction be separate from the ones that are focused on tech and innovation. And so we are working to bring those communities to have one community that cares about learner experience, right? That's what we're shifting to. But you got to do that carefully, right? If you just slam everyone together and say, "Hey, you're a big happy family now," right? That doesn't work. And so we're trying to be very cautious about it. A good example of this is this summer in June, we are hosting our events, and it's the first year that we're going to host both the ASCD annual conference and ISTE Live, which is ISTE's annual conference, at the same time. But we are still hosting them as two separate events. You register for them separately. You show up and can go to the programs for each separately. They just happen to be in the same convention center at the same time.
Just
And by the
look at
way,
that.
your
Surprise.
badge will get you into any session from the reciprocal conference, right? So
Right.
it's a way to say, hey, there's a lot of opportunity to cross, but we're not taking away the core
Right.
essence of each of the organizations that people have learned to love over the years.
Right. Well, I think that is so wise because I know there are people who are so incredibly dedicated to their arm of this, fork, so to speak. And so they'll go to their conference, but they might say, you know what, let me just meander over to one of these other sessions. And they might say, wow, this actually does speak to a need that I have. Richard, you won't remember this, but I think it was like 3 years ago when this merge started to be discussed, and you came to the ASCD conference and they had an author event. I was lucky enough to be there, and you stood up and you said, okay, we're going to do this. And you said, we are going to move slowly, we're going to move carefully, but these two organizations need to be working in sync. And an author sitting next to me, we were eating cheesecake at the time, I believe, said, this just makes sense. And so I think that's, if you needed a tagline, that is the merging makes sense. These curriculum leaders have to be talking about tech and innovation and vice versa.
Yeah, that's right. It's totally it's the right case. And on that going the other way, you said in the vice versa is you can't have innovation and technology solutions that aren't completely aligned to the learning vision for your school wherever you are, right? So
Right.
they've got it. Anyway, I'm super excited, and the more we start to, again, carefully, slowly, the more we start to blend the communities, the more we see great value for both sides of really being
Exactly.
the people that care about learning, period, right?
Exactly. Exactly. So this podcast is primarily for principals and aspiring principals, although we have a lot of listeners who are in different roles. And what I want to say that I love about both ISTE and ASCD is very 30,000 square foot, very much in idea and theories and practical application. A lot of our listeners are members of one of these organizations. And so I'm just curious, when you think about leading through this very complex merger, what leadership lessons have you learned from navigating it and kind of creating a new organization that's still going to have its own identity separately?
Wow, that's a great question.
Mhm.
Let me think about that. I mean, I think one of the most important things that I've learned is how important it is to really deeply understand the needs of the educators that we serve. I think organizations, ours and others, can very quickly slip into a mode of thinking that we know what's best for principals, for teachers, for superintendents, right? And it comes from a good place. It's not. It's just but not really deeply understand what their needs are. And so keeping that front and center is critical. And there's some interesting things that we've tried to do that. So for example, we have a tradition now that we've started where every year we close down our offices for a day and we do a shadow a teacher day or shadow a leader day. And all of our staff, doesn't matter what your role is in the organization, you have to go and find an educator, could be a principal, could be a classroom teacher, whoever, and your goal is to meet them at the beginning of the day and be their shadow throughout the whole day. Just listen, just watch, just hear what they're hearing. And it's fascinating to come back. We do kind of a debrief afterwards to hear the lessons that we learn when you're actually kind of in the shoes of those educators. And a lot of us, I was a teacher for years. Most of the people on our team worked in education, but it's been years since I was teaching in a classroom, right? And so that idea of really developing empathy for our, the educators we serve first, and then going back and having the hard conversation about, products and services that we have that may or may not be aligned with the needs that we're hearing. And we've had some of those tough conversations of saying, hey, this is a program we've had for years. Boy, we love this program, but it's not lining up with what the needs are. It's time to shut it down. And you just have to be willing to do that if you're going to stay relevant.
Right. I love that your team goes out in the field, and that certainly aligns with my experience with ISTE and ASCD because you guys know what's up. You know what's happening and how people are feeling, because this also is a, it's such a feeling profession,
Mhm.
and to have an organization leading us that knows those feels, which leads me to my next question. So, listeners, Richard and I talked a couple of weeks ago. We were actually geeking out about the curriculum leadership part of this work, and I think I said, "Richard, let me help," which is a conversation for a different day. But we talked, and then I happened to check LinkedIn, and Richard, you posted about this collaboration that you developed with Meta, and I emailed you instantly and said you have to come and talk about this. So, talking about this is about the feels, about the dirty work that needs to get done. Tell us about this collaboration, how it started, and where it is now.
Yeah, it's a really exciting collaboration, and really the credit is to a bunch of really smart people on our team. But and my for those that don't know, and you mentioned at the beginning, I care deeply about this idea of creating healthy digital cultures in home and school, right? And part of that is teaching kids to be amazing digital citizens, and we can talk about that. But part of it is getting the tools right, and getting the tech right. And one area that we have struggled is figuring out how to find the right balance around social media. That's not going to be a surprise to anybody. And in particular, we have some challenges in schools staying on top of social media that can become very disruptive. And it's less disruptive with individual use of social media. It becomes much more disruptive when all of a sudden somebody posts on one of these, confession accounts or fight accounts, or these sorts of things, something about a bunch of kids in the school. Now all of a sudden everybody's all in a kerfuffle about that. And this was interesting. Just to be very open with you about it. My own son, who's in a senior in high school, was included in one of these confession accounts. Just some really horrible things that were being said. And he's a confident kid. He wasn't it. He knew how to not let that totally sink him, but it still hurt. And I remember talking to him. I said, "Have you done anything about this?" He's like, "Yeah, I flagged it, but the Instagram never responds." And I pinged the principal, and I just said, "Hey, are you aware of this?" And she's like, "Oh my gosh, yes, we get this happens all the time." I was like, "Do you ever flag it for Instagram?" She's like, "Oh, we flag it all the time. Nothing ever happens, right?" And so then I started picking up the phone and talking to my other principal friends and said, "Is this an issue that you're running into?" And the answer was like, "Oh my gosh, all the time we have these things and we flag and nothing ever happens." So I reached out to the team at Meta, and I've done some work with them over the years, and said, "Hey, this is a real issue that we're hearing from schools. Can we do something about it?" And I half expected them to be like, "Yeah, buzz off, right? We don't have time."
Right.
But that was not their response. They actually said, "We really think this is important to deal with. We're not sure the right way to tackle it. Can we work together to figure something out?" And that led to a partnership, and over 6 months or so, working with a handful of schools in our ISTE ASCD network, we piloted a new feature, which has now just rolled out to all schools. And basically, it's an opportunity where school leaders can apply. They have to be verified as the school leader, and there's a little process. It's a pretty quick process. Verify that they're a school leader, and then they can get on their Instagram app what I call school mode, and it actually is a slightly different version of the app that gives them some additional functionality. And so a school leader who's had their app validated, right, or that goes into school mode, can go in, and if they see a post that's inappropriate, or they see a whole account that's like a confession account or a fight account, one of these, they can flag it, and it will get expedited review. And removal. And in addition to that, there's a two-way communication, because even on the standard one, if you flag something, you have no idea. Did anybody see this? Who knows? So if you're the school leader and you flag an account on Instagram, not only will be an expedited review, but they'll also respond back if it's not removed for some reason. Say, "Hey, let me explain why," or "Let me tell you," or "We need some more detail." And there's even a way to challenge that. So it's a really great opportunity. It's completely free. I would highly recommend, if you're, any school leaders that are listening to this, go to Instagram, get your app, get verified. They'll just do a quick process to verify that you're the school leader, and then you'll get this kind of new mode on your app that you can use to help stay on top of that healthy culture.
Here's why I love this so much. Many principals, and I was one of them, feel that Instagram in particular is an untouchable entity, and
Yeah,
they're unwilling to recognize the impact that social
yeah,
media platforms have on students and staff. And the fact that ISTE and ASCD decided to flip this narrative, the fact that you picked up the phone, and shameless plug here, guys, this is why we have to be members of these organizations.
yeah.
It's not about hosting a conference. It's about having somebody who has the political power and acumen and the willingness to say, you know what, I'm actually going to speak up for school leaders all across, all across this country and beyond. So thank you,
And,
thank you.
and Jen, actually, I think I mean, I think it's an interesting thing just talking about the previous conversation we were just having about the two organizations coming together. So this is one of those things that we had, all this access to these school leaders that could help give us this input and pilot and give us feedback. And we had sort of the tech, not only the relationships on the tech
Uh-huh.
side, but also the ability to talk in technical terms about
Right,
how to build out the functionality that we needed, which is, I think, part of why we were able to get this done. I don't think either ISTE or ASCD could have done it in their previous
exactly.
worlds on their own. So I hope you'll see more of this sort of thing happen
Yeah.
as we continue to move forward.
That's exactly right. And, to be a school leader or to be an innovator, to be a technology expert, is a very lonely job if you feel like you're the only one navigating this. But this move, um, this collaboration to me is symbolic of the power when people come together and say, hey, I have that problem too. I have that problem too. And then you call Instagram, they say, yeah, we know that's a problem. How can we fix it?
Yeah.
That's how things actually change right there. And to that point, Richard, that the landscape of educational technology is constantly evolving. I'm sure if you never hear AI again in your life, you'll probably be happy. But how does ASCD and ISTE stay ahead of trends and ensure that your resources and guidance remain relevant and impactful for the educators you serve?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a challenge, right? It's a challenge for everybody staying on top of it. And I think things are moving faster and faster in the world that we're in, which is not a surprise to anybody that works in education. I think what we try to do, and where we're a little bit different than some of the others that are out there, is as much as possible, we really try to focus on underlying principles of effectiveness.
Hmm.
And we find that those don't change as often. And it's helpful to navigate. So if you're looking at just, features or what's the greatest new app, do you remember a number of years ago, there used to always be the like top 20 free apps in education? Like those are, you could just never stay on top of that kind of like, what's the app du jour, right? But what we try to do is say, hey, there's some basic underlying principles that we want to see. We want to see apps that enable curiosity, that enable engagement, right? We want to see apps that are safe and accessible, right? We want to see tools and apps that are research based. And so if we can focus on those things, it actually helps because it doesn't feel quite so much like a fire hose that you're drinking out of, because you know how to parse things that are coming at you a little bit better. And
Right.
there's some cool stuff that we're doing, by the way. I'll just sort of slip this in here. One of the big frustrations that I have had is up until now, forever, education events that have some sort of expo floor, right? Which ISTE and ASCD always did. A lot of pretty much every organization has these. And I would notice that we would go in our sessions and we would say, well, don't look at apps that aren't doing these things, and don't consider tools that don't meet these requirements. And then you'd walk to the expo floor, and we had no filter on who got on. If you paid for your spot, you were on the expo floor. And I
Right.
thought that is not that's not what somebody does if they're trying to model, practice what you preach.
Right.
So we've started doing something. This will be the first year that you'll see it at our event, which is coming up in June. On our expo floor, we do a couple things that are different. So one is we don't allow sales on our floor. You can demo, but it's no sales. So that's the first thing. The second thing, and here's the new part of it, is we have started giving priority for apps that come and have been validated by third parties on a variety of areas, whether they're safe, whether they're interoperable, whether they're research based, right? And those apps, the products get to choose. They get first, bid, early opportunity to choose where they are on the floor to kind of get there. So this year it's kind of mostly carrot, but over time we're going to notch that up a little bit. And our hope is that in a couple years, the only apps that you'll see on our floor are ones that have passed these sort of validations by, and it can't just be the app developer saying, "Oh yeah, we're good," right? By credible third parties, whether it's ISTE ASCD, whether it's other, there's a bunch of organizations that do this. If they've gone through a credible third party review, that's why we put them in front. And one more
It's
thing that we're doing is on the floor, we're giving these, we're actually we'll have some materials, some science and some materials to help educators have better conversations with the product leader. So it'll say, here's some questions you might ask. So we're trying to make the
right.
products go to a higher bar in order to show up on the floor. And we're trying to train our educators as they go through to ask questions that help get through the noise a little bit better.
It's just so responsible of you, Richard, and your team because, I say all the time, there's a lot of people out there that are looking to make a buck off the
Mhm.
backs of school districts and school employees. And you're right to your point about the top 10, 20 free apps. I love you teachers, but many of you jumped on free apps and we all um, got involved with apps that weren't vetted, that weren't verified. And what they were doing, as Ohio just passed Senate Bill 29, I don't know if you've heard of that, Richard, but it is a very, very strict law that has districts. We have to be accountable for who's taking our student data. And when we as a district looked into this, we were blown away by the number of apps, just one classroom at a time. Sign up for this, sign up for that. And they're taking our student data. And we don't want to work with vendors like that. We don't want to work with apps like that. We want to work with folks that are not only are their intentions aligned with their output, but they're not sneaky in grabbing student data. They're, when we hire somebody to help us with something, we shouldn't be losing something on the other end. So I applaud you for having the courage to think about the vendors and what they're doing there.
I thank you, and I hope my real hope is that this starts a broader trend, right? I hope that
Right.
at some point all of the all of the organizations that have conferences will sort of start to model this, and that's how we improve the quality of the products. Let me share one other thing. So that this idea of what's happening in Ohio is actually happening in a lot of other states too, sometimes through legislation, sometimes through regulation, but what it's meaning right now is that the districts are taking on this review process that you just went through. And again, good on
Right.
them, but that's a huge amount of work. And so if a product is used in, let's say how many districts do we have? About 12,000 districts, something like that, right?
Right.
So let's say a product is used in, 5,000 districts, right? That's 5,000 people that are doing the exact same review to see if the data is safe, right? And that is a terrible redundancy. And so we are trying to do something where we can, when we can find out if an app has been reviewed and passes muster, that we're sharing it so another district cannot have to do that same review. We just launched a site. It's a newish site, edtechindex.org, edtechindex.org. And if you go to edtechindex.org, you will see all of the apps that we're aware of that exist. If you find one that's not on there, because they pop up all the time, you can click to suggest to tell us about it, and we'll add it. But all of the apps that we can find, we list on there. And then we're going through, and as we can find evidence that somebody has reviewed an app, again, for data interoperability, for privacy, for usability, those are some of the elements. We will indicate on there that it's been reviewed and who did the review. And then if you're a school, if you're a school district, you're reviewing, you can pull it up and say, hey, this app was reviewed for accessibility by CAST, and here's what they said. And you're like, well, CAST, they're the best on accessibility anywhere. If they gave the thumbs up, we're good. And so the idea is it will save a huge amount of time for districts.
That that blows my mind. I'm thinking about the rural principal who has maybe K to 12, all the things, all the responsibilities. You're one person and you don't have time or probably the expertise or the understanding to be able to do that on your own.
Yeah.
And so here's a resource there for you. Edtechindex.org.
Yeah,
I
education
was
is important. And
rapidly
it's new, it's new. So go kick the tires on it. There's a little feedback button, like tell us if it's working, if it's not, if there's stuff you want to see, and we'll keep working on it. And the cool part is we're doing that in collaboration with a bunch of other organizations. So ISTE and ASCD are leading it, but also COSIN, Digital Promise, One Ed Tech, CAST. There's a number of organizations that are part of it. And so our goal is to say, and look, districts still have the tough job of saying, is it still the right app for
Right.
our vision, for what we're trying to do with learning? That's on you, right? You got to
Right.
do that. But if we can give back, so we did it. We did a rough survey to see how much time was being spent, and districts were spending roughly 40,000 hours reviewing apps, right? At times 12,000, whatever number of districts there are in the US. It crazy. And so our goal is to say, can we give back some of those 40,000 hours to use to actually integrate and use those apps
Yes.
in really meaningful ways? Because hopefully you get some extra time
Right.
back. So that's the goal.
That's amazing. And on behalf of all of us, thank you so
Yeah.
much. So, what are some other, we are going to get into your book because I really want to talk about this, but what are some, before we do that, what are some other initiatives that ASCD and ISTE are working on? And you might want to talk about AI because everybody else is. So what do you
Well, I
think?
better talk about that then. Well, let me give you two. I'll give you one that's AI and one that's not AI, just to make sure we can still talk about non-AI things.
All
So on
right.
AI, this is really important. When we talk about AI, when we go out and work with schools and talk about AI, everybody's talking about it. But when you break the conversation into what they're talking about, almost all of the conversation is around what I would call AI for kind of logistical purposes or efficiencies, right? Can I help teachers, make a rubric faster? Can I help them, make some content faster? Can I help them draft an email, right? Things like that. Which, don't misunderstand. I am anything we do to save teachers time, go for it, right? But I'm particularly concerned that we're not spending very much time talking about modeling how we help students learn to use AI in ways that are really helpful and meaningful, ways that help them be better at being human, right? So it's very much efficiencies that we're trying to get, but not very much about how are we teaching and preparing young people to thrive in an AI world. And so we launched an initiative, and we're very fortunate to have funding from google.org to help cover some of the costs of this. An initiative called Generation AI. And we pledged to train 200,000 teachers in 2 years on how to model effective AI use with their students. And so a lot of these activities, how can you use AI as a brainstorming buddy? How can you use AI as a tool to help visualize, information? How can you use AI as a tool to help you synthesize information? How can you use AI as a tool to give feedback, right, on your performance? One of the things we always talk about is how there's not nearly enough feedback. Well, AI actually can do a great job of providing feedback, but we have to model that. We have to model that use. So that's the first one, and we have some really great opportunities there, including some of our award-winning online courses that through this scholarship from google.org are available for free for educators up until we hit our 200,000 teacher goal, and hopefully beyond. So check that out if you want to. If you just go to generationai.org, you'll get our website that tells more about that. We're very excited about trying to shift the narrative a bit around AI for learning.
Okay, so now talk to me about something to prove that we can do this. We can talk about something that's not AI. Let's do
Not
this,
AI.
Richard.
Okay, we still can do this. That is true. Thank you for bringing that up. So on the non side, we have been, and this is something that I've actually been talking to you a bit about, is I I've been really concerned about the fact that we aren't doing enough to prepare and support people that are in district instructional leadership roles. These are, I think, these are some of maybe the most important role in the district when it comes to learning, right? Yeah, yes, those that are superintendents, it is incredibly important that you're leading the charge and doing all that. But the reality is, most of a superintendent's day is not focused on learning, right? It's focused on budgets and politics and community engagement and all those things, right? But really, what we are about, what ISTE and ACD are about, is making sure the learning experience is amazing for every student every day. And the people who are primarily responsible for setting that vision in a district are the deputy chiefs for CNI or CAOs or chief instructional officers. They all have different titles, right? We have different names for it, but it's that person who is in that senior most leadership role for learning, and people that work on their teams, right? The kind of curriculum leaders. That's a group that we haven't done a good job of spotlighting. We haven't done a good job of telling their story, and we really haven't done a good job of helping prepare them to be successful in their roles. Most people in that role, it's the role that you have, right, have become successful by trial and error, right? They've figured it out, and like, good on y'all for doing that. But they really should have, if you're a CIO, there's all these training programs that help make sure you are ready to go. If you're a superintendent, there's these superintendent boot camps that different people run to make sure you're ready to go. If you're in this sort of chief instructional officer role, it's like, good luck, hope you figure it out. So we just launched it this year, actually just a couple months ago, a new certification. We've had our ISTE certification for a long time, which is really the top certification you can get around using technology in learning. We've started a new instructional leaders certification. And it's a program that instructional leaders can go through to really get deep understanding. It's compressed, it's in a compressed time, but deep understanding. What are the key things you need to know? What are the things you don't actually need to worry that much about, right? A lot of it is just saying where to focus. As part of the process, there's a portfolio that you help create and you get some feedback on it. And then you're awarded this certified, this certification for instructional leadership. And that's something I'm really excited about because I want to just elevate the profession of school instructional leaders. And we just got to do more there.
Yeah. When you and I talked a few weeks ago about this, I told you it's such an opportunity because instructional leaders, usually people can attend a conference a year. So one year they'll do math, then they'll go to a literacy conference, then they'll go to a social studies conference, but never is there that learning about instructional leadership. And that's the work, right? That's the work. And so many principals are walking around with this heavy guilt. I know our listeners will connect with this because they feel like they're not good at instructional leadership, but everywhere they go, they're told, well, you're the instructional leader, you should know. But to have this, not only the certification, but the spotlight on this as the work, I think will be of great relief to many school leaders.
We're really excited. We're excited
Yeah.
about it. Like even another thing, here's just a silly thing, but it matters. There's a whole bunch of these, Superintendent of the Year awards. There's a bunch of, right. There is no Chief Instructional Leader of the Year award. Why
Right.
the heck not?
Right.
This is an incredibly important role. And so we're going to be starting, we actually have a new event that we're going to be starting specifically for district instructional leaders. And as part of that, we're going to start a new award, which is going to be spotlighting really amazing instructional leaders. And so I just hope over the next couple years we can really build this community, really tighten this community, and make sure that those people that have the have the responsibility of really setting the vision for learning in the organization, which is the most important thing. Schools are learning organizations. There is no other role that is more
That's
important than
it.
the person that is setting the vision for learning. So
Right.
we are going to do whatever we can to really help support and just love this group of talented people.
I feel like I'm hearing collective cheer from all these people who have been in the foxhole for decades, and no one ever actually said, "Hey, we see you down there." So, such a win for them. So, listeners, obviously, Richard is a very busy man. In addition to his work with ISTE and ASCD, he's also an author. One of this book you wrote, again titled, if anybody's by a computer, type this in and get thyself a copy. Digital for Good: Raising Kids to Thrive in an Online World. Harvard Business Review Press published this. Tell us about the reason for this book? Writing it, how it was received in the marketplace. Talk to us.
Well, it started actually because I was so frustrated with the misinformation that I was hearing out there about how to create a healthy digital culture at home. And school, but really it started with what we're seeing at home. And look, I have four kids that are at the time they were all in elementary, middle school, or high school, right? In this moment that I was writing the book. And we were trying to figure this out as parents too. Like we were not immune from trying to know what the right balance is. But a lot of the messages as we started reaching out actually, we know things that in some cases make the situation worse. So,
Hmm.
for example, there's this, idea of banning kids from having access to devices until they're a certain age, right? And I get where that sounds really compelling because like, whew, let's just not have to deal with that in our house. The problem is that being a good digital citizen, right? Being a good takes practice, just like any complex skill, like learning a language, learning to play piano, right? Takes skill. And you got to practice that. And so if we don't practice that with our kids starting at a reasonable age, then we have not set them up to be able to walk out and be healthy members of this very complex digital world, right? And I often compare it to again, I used to be a Spanish teacher, so learning languages, right? If we say, hey, we're not gonna practice speaking Spanish until you get to 11th grade, and then we're gonna drop you in the middle of Spain or Mexico City and hope you survive. Like, oh my gosh, who would do that to a kid, right? But that's exactly what we do with technology, and so we need to be able to really help model. And so that's what we talk about in the book. We talk about really practical strategies for how you model healthy behavior at an early enough age that we aren't running into some of the challenges that we're running into down the road. And one of the ideas too, I'll just share one example is, in the book, we talk about this idea of screen time. Everybody always says, my kid's blank years old, how much screen time? But the challenge with that is it actually doesn't, the time using screens matters way less than the what you are doing on the screen. And so we are trying to shift. I mean, if I could had a magic wand, it could just take one concept out of our vocabulary and switch it. I would switch from screen time to screen value.
Right.
And would say, what, and I compare this to food, right, Jen? So we, with all of us, we teach our kids healthy eating. But imagine if we had food time, right? From 6 to 7, it's food time, and you can eat Twinkies and Doritos. I don't care for as long as you're finished in an hour.
Right.
Like, no, we would never do that, right? When it's time for a meal, we sit down and we say we're gonna eat healthy food. We're gonna eat a variety of foods, and at the end, if we want to have a little Twinkie, we can, but it's gonna be a small amount and it's gonna be occasional, right? And also, we stop eating when we feel full, not because a timer goes off, right? That same concept, if we can apply it to our technology use, can totally transform the way we, the feel of technology in our homes and schools. So that's some of what's in the
Yes. Yes, yes. I hear so many band-aids being put on this,
book.
gaping wound.
Yeah,
One of those band-aids is, well, let's just ban phones.
yeah,
Well, then you'll hear the parent saying, "Listen, I don't have a landline anymore.
yeah,
My kid needs this phone
yeah,
for safety or so I know when to pick him up or whatever." So you can't ban it,
yeah,
or you can't ban it, but I much more like the analogy of food time, right?
yeah,
And if you have food time and you say, well, if you're good, you can have more food time,
yeah.
or if you complete your homework, we'll give you food time till bed,
Right.
that would be bonkers. Like we can't even
Totally crazy. Why would we do that, right?
right.
And
Exactly.
here's the danger, Jen, and here's the real danger, is that a concept teaches kids that all activities that happen on their screen are of the same value.
Correct.
And nothing could, that is the exact opposite of what we want to teach. What we want to teach, just like with food, we want to teach some activities have really great value. If you're doing activities that are curious and creative and learning or engaging with friends or family, go for it. If you're playing
Right.
mindless, repetitive games, even 5 minutes is probably too much. And so
Right.
we have to really have that conversation about how the tech is being used
Right.
and how it can be used to strengthen your family. So like here's one
Right.
example that I share in the book, and it's just one example. I'm this sort of guy when I go on vacation, I never remember to take a picture, right? I could just never remember to do it. I'm terrible at it. I wish I had pictures. I always forget. So we have what we call device use agreements with our family, with all of our kids, just like a little agreement that they sign when they get their device and access to our internet.
Right.
And it has the responsibilities that they have and the responsibilities that we have. And one of the responsibilities that they have is to curate family memories. So
Ah,
they have a notepad. We have a shared notepad, and when somebody says something really goofy, they write it down. And then
mm,
at the periodically throughout the year, we sit down and we read through all the funny things that people said. And actually, at the end of the year, we then take the best of and we put those in our Christmas card. So like that's one model. Another is they all have a camera on their devices, so they capture family pictures and family events. But that's one of their responsibilities. They know that part of the responsibility for having a phone and access to the internet in our family is they have to help curate and capture family memories. And that just sets up such a
right,
good tone for what the culture is in our family for using
right.
technology.
I love that because it celebrates the good that
Mhm, yeah.
is technology. There is so many benefits to it, and this shows what it can be used for. I led a parent presentation once, and I titled it "No is a complete sentence,"
Yeah.
because I was trying to empower parents to be able to say no to phones. And one mother, I'll never forget her, she raised her hand and she said, I tried to say, no, we're done right now with the phone or the computer or video game, whatever it was. And she said, but my son gets so angry and he says, I hate you. And he says so many mean things. What do I do? And I said, well, if you don't say no, you are telling him that this digital world is bigger than you. And this digital world is bigger than no. And you're teaching him that we don't need to have those guardrails. And I think you're doing two things there with the curator of memories. You're saying not only are there limits and expectation in a contract, but let's look at the good that can come out of this.
Yeah.
So let's not get to a place of I hate you, mom, because you're getting me off video games. Let's get to a place of I love this moment by the beach. Look at it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And that story just sort of hits me in the heart. And I hope that parent could, I hope we could get her a copy of my book. But like one of the things that we talk about, and parents struggle with this, is they will often say that they will state the activity that they don't want, right? Don't
right,
keep playing that game. Don't keep texting. Don't keep right. And a really simple shift that makes a big difference is to shift to what is the activity they want them to do. We had kids that say, my parents just come in and say, stop playing tech. And I'm like, all
yes,
right, what do you want me to do? And they're like, I don't care, just not that. And you're like,
right,
well, okay. So one of the reframes that we talk about, that I talk about in the book is saying, hey, look, it's not that I have a problem with this game. It's actually a really fun game, but your family misses you. Come spend time with them. Or it's not that I have a problem with you, texting all your friends, but it's a beautiful day and you haven't had any exercise yet. Let's go get some exercise, right?
right,
Or you haven't done homework yet. Let's do that. So just that one shift away from like don't use the technology to saying, hey, again, I don't have a problem. I like watching YouTube videos too. Like no
right,
problem. But there's another activity that has more value. See, we're back to screen value. With more
right.
value than that. And it's let's get some balance. And I think
Yes,
just helping young people recognize the game may be totally fun, maybe totally
right,
fine, but we need exercise. We need to engage with the family. We need to do our homework. We need to do maybe some other types of digital activities, not just that one.
right,
That's the goal of teaching them.
right.
If we can help model that, and it doesn't happen overnight, but if you can model that over the course of a couple years, right, you set up really healthy members of our digital world.
Exactly. And let's not reward kids with screen time. The reward might be a
Yes.
walk
Oh
with the
man,
dog.
just
D-
don't even. Right. And on the flip
Right.
side, it's not a punishment if
Right.
screen time is taken away, right?
Right.
And we say that in our contract, in this contract that I tell you we write with our kids, one of the things that it says is at any point we may decide that it's time to take a break. It doesn't mean you're in trouble.
Right.
I hate it when we teach kids that the only time they can't have technology is as a punishment.
Exactly.
No, it should be
Right.
it's totally appropriate to just take a break for a little bit. And
Right.
that's okay. It's not a
Exactly.
punishment to take a break.
And the break can be a reward. Come on, we're going to go on
Yes,
a family bike ride. We'll be
totally.
back in an hour and we'll get back to our lives, but that can be the reward.
That's right.
Exactly. So everybody go out and get yourself a copy of Digital for Good. Buy it for your teams, buy it for your schools, buy it for your whole town. It's important that we have this conversation. So Richard, we're going to end with this question of hope. What are you most excited about the current state of education?
Um, you know,
Thinking. I see his you guys, I can see his brain.
see the smoke coming out of
Right.
my ears. Look, I don't want to sugarcoat this because this is a really tough moment. I think for all the reasons that we know, I don't need to list them all, but there's a lot. It's a rough moment. What I will say is, having worked my entire career in education, um, teachers, educators are the most creative professionals I have ever met. And I've spent time in the tech industry, I spent time in government, I spent time in a whole variety of different environments in Silicon Valley. Like, bar none, educators are the most creative individuals. And when you have a moment of crisis, when you have a dark moment, when you have a moment with lots of constraints, the people that you want on your team are the creatives, the ones that can create their way out of anything. And I know sometimes that feels exhausting, and I'm feeling it. I think we're all feeling it, but I feel so much hope because I know that the secret weapon of educators is being incredibly creative people. And I have no doubt that we're going to find, even often because of constraints, that's what leads to the most innovative solutions. Nobody wants constraints put on them, but it's those constraints that drive innovation. And so I think what we're going to see is some really interesting creative solutions to our problems because we have constraints and we have creative professionals. And that just gives me a lot of hope.
Right, right. Well, it gives me hope that you have hope, Richard. It really does. So thank you for your time today. I've enjoyed every single word, and I know you might be the busiest guy in education right now, but I appreciate you giving us this time.
I'm far less busy than any of the educators listening to this. So let's be clear about that. But Jen, thanks for having me. It's just always so fun talking to you. I really appreciate it.
Excellent. Okay, thank you.